to Sisinoxolo and to Nikiwe. And I want to start by reading this quote. The hearts I have touched will be the proof that I lived and that I've made a difference, and this world will see that I was here. Many of the mourners at Orlando Stadium raising their fists in that characteristic Winnie Mandela way, of course, as the casket left the stadium, many waving their goodbyes because, of course, as we heard from our Criselda Lewis earlier, this is going to be a private family burial. Yes, some of the officials will be there. Certainly the president is going to be there and some of the leading officials, but it's not really open to the public in the way that we saw the memorial at the Orlando Stadium. And I'm going to come back now to you, Professor Somato Tafikeni, and let's just start with the fantastic hymn, the famous hymn that was sung during the service. And I think it really encapsulates the aspirations and the hopes that Mama Winnie Mandela might have had. Lizalisi tingalako tiklongosi yenyaniso zonke inhlanga zalomhlaba mazizuze usindi. So the idea that God's destiny for all the nations of the world would be fulfilled, and certainly this one no exception.
Certainly that hymn by Diosoga, who was a Presbyterian priest, is both visionary and also it is quite a clear statement about the destiny of a people who want their wish, who want their collective desires to be fulfilled. Winnie's life was always about that particular commitment up to the end. I do think that she could have chosen to be bitter, retreat into a corner. She chose not to, because what was beckoning her was an idea larger than the self and personal inconveniences. And that's what drives many people who are driven by something bigger than them.
Of course, she left this world at the ripe age of 81 years old, had lived this rich life, this life of resilience. But maybe let's trace back some of her history to her very early beginnings. Her grandfather, Chief Mazinga, a prosperous chief. In fact, I believe he had 29 wives, had residences all the way from Mbongweni to Itutywa, leading up, of course, to how she was raised, becoming the first medical social worker, because I think people throw this word social worker. She was the first medical social worker. She comes from a life of sophistication. She comes from a very strong lineage in the Pondo area of the Transkei. And so to come to Johannesburg and experience injustice firsthand, not only, I suppose, having watched the rural lives of her people, but also coming to Johannesburg, coming from this lineage and being treated like a second-class citizen, that's where the beginnings of her own discomfort with what was happening in the country begin.
Narrative injustice, in our understanding of the struggle, starts with us thinking that people get conscientized when they get to Forte University, Wits University, or when they get to the cities. And therefore we tend to deny the social history of their upbringing in their rural setting. And Winnie Mandela comes as this princess from a royalty. She gets into a city and she is now being reduced into an ordinary person. Her reaction is first to say, I know who I am. I already have been formed as a person who is important in my community, and therefore I will not accept this notion that I have to be downgraded. I'm a nobody. And that is one of the reasons why struggles in rural areas during the time of dispossession tended to be so stiff, precisely because people who had not been exposed to this urban concentration where people were in the frontiers of racism, once they got there, they then react in the manner they react, not because they started being conscious of their being once they arrive there.
I think it's very important to underscore that point repeatedly because, of course, she was at pains to say that she was not a protege of Nelson Mandela. She wasn't his product. But also that even her own struggles against the system did not begin with merely trying to keep his name alive. That comes much later. She was first arrested long before Nelson Mandela was sentenced to go to Robben Island. She was arrested having taken part in that women's pass strike in the early 60s. That's her first taste of jail, and in fact immediately thereafter she's dismissed from her post as a medical social worker from it wasn't called Chris Hani Baragwanath in those days, it was simply Baragwanath Hospital, but really underscoring the point that her first experience suffering directly at the hands of the apartheid regime were for struggles in her own right as a woman in the movement.
That is why she's such a grounded, organic leader. But unfortunately, the narrative in a patriarchal society, especially within a religious context, is often that a man is made in the image of God and a woman is made in the image of the husband or of the father. And in this particular case, if we're to reflect on this particular experience, it would liberate Winnie to say this was always a leader. Her brief encounter with Madiba, brief, did not necessarily transform or transfigure Winnie Mandela, because she was already a rising leader in her own right.
I mean, we talk about her later exposure to the media and the icon that she became, but really from the beginning, when she first made an appearance at the treason trial, for example, in full isiXhosa regalia, I mean, you saw many of the women, certainly at the stadium today, wearing similar types of headdress, at least. Even that was something she understood, the idea that she could use imagery for political theatre, and it unnerved the authorities from the very beginning.
That's where now we say we should not just see Winnie in terms of just the political activism. She was a trendsetter, she was a pathfinder, she was a trailblazer when it comes to popular culture and the fashion statement, projecting her indigenous culture in terms of the clothing. And that in itself is very important. Also combine that with the fact that when Madiba went to court, he wanted to wear his traditional outfit. So this consciousness was always there, where people said, we are grounded in our own cultures. Yes, we might be westernized, we might have a Western education, but that consciousness of indigeneity was very important.
And finding ways to subvert the system, because of course when they told her that she couldn't wear traditional gear, she showed up simply in ANC colors, and what could they say then?
She's one person who for so many years defied everything and always just put different combinations of ANC colors when it was not fashionable. Only people in exile and outside the country could dare do that.
Of course, if you're looking to the right of your screen, we're seeing visuals from Fourways Memorial Park, as indeed we're expecting the procession to come through that entranceway, and we'll bring you what visuals we can as soon as that part of the day progresses. But Prof, I want to come back to something you said a little earlier on. I mean, I think many people after this we're going to be calling for days to be named after Winnie Mandela for boulevards, for airports, as we've seen, bridges, universities, perhaps certainly hospitals, military barracks to be named after her. But you're saying that her legacy has to mean more than just physical monuments. It's got to be a change in the society. It's got to be the kind of change that she fought for. And I think we need to be honest, as much as this was a beautiful send-off, Winnie Mandela to the very end was still not quite happy 24 years into democracy with what had been achieved. She felt that we hadn't gone quite as far as we could have.
The most important thing that she was consistent about was that freedom was not merely about symbolism of reconciliation. It was not merely to celebrate a document called the Constitution, but to transform the lives of people in a fundamental manner. 24 years on, yes, we recognize the progress made, but in the main, we only have put institutions of democracy, we have put in social security, but we have not unleashed the full potential of the country by actually changing the apartheid geography. by changing the social structure of race and class in the society. That's why the current discourse about socio-economic transformation becomes so very important, and it would be a living legacy of the likes of Winnie Mandela to say, each one of us, the experience or the lived experience would be a monument we leave behind if we're to all collectively strive to change those, rather than to simply change names there, change the streets, and you remain with such inequalities, with such levels of intergenerational poverty, as well as a divided society.
The EFF leader today, Julius Malema, asked for a sign. What sign might that be, and to what end, and indeed to whom?
I think it was a rhetorical gesture to have a dialogue with the person who is in a coffin or in the world of spirit, to say, we're waiting for your sign. Don't be surprised that later on in the campaign he might be saying that we are receiving these signs from Winnie. And the president was quick to retort to say, we will be guided by your spirit in actually healing. So it was quite an interesting dialogue from different positions about a person who is gone, and therefore it was a dialogue with posterity.
Well, the heavens have opened up to receive the spirit of a fighter, a leader who leaves behind her a legacy that's perhaps second to none, because no one had the unique experiences, the unique isolation that Mama Winnie Mandela faced on her own, without any direction, an intellectual in her own right, and a towering figure in the struggle, and certainly in the history of South Africa going forward. We're taking now back to Orlando Stadium for some more coverage.
Nangoko beske sacho ngaphambili sathi njengokuba insuku bezihamba nje emva kokubana ewile umama wethu uWinnie Mandela, zivekele ngokuvakala intetha ngaye ezimhlamba izinto ebekakade etyatyekwa ngazo ngelixa esaphila. Sabona ke into kokubana noko asinakuyiqoshelisa le nkqubo singevanga kwabezomthetho nakwabezobulungisa into kokuba ithiwani na into xa inje. Ngoku ke apha estudio sinaye umphathiswa wezobulungisa umnumzana Michael Masuta. Sifuna ke sive kuye into kokuba igama lomntu ongasekhoyo lihlanjwa kanjani na phansi kwezi imeko. Mnumzana Masuta, siyakwamkela. Njengokuba uso undivile, umama uMandela ebesoloko etyholwa nangaleya ingakumbi leya kaStompi ibisoloko ihleli kuye ilichaphaza elibi. Ngoku kuvela ubungqina bokokuba eneneni akakhange ambulali. Kusemagxeni enu abezomthetho ke ngoku into kokubana lihlanjwe igama lakhe, nilihlamba njani xa ilele ubuthongo bokufa?
Ithi ngiqale ngithi njengoba umthetho usho ukuthi xa ungumuntu umthetho ukubona njengomuntu ongamoshanga kanye ongaphulanga umthetho until inkundla ifumane ukuthi unecala. So thina ngokwazi kwethu akhange kuze kube nenkundla yeyafumana umama Winnie Mandela ukuthi unecala. Ingazo sizama uku-encourage abantu ukuthi wait until a verdict is issued by a court. Ngoba it's very easy for people to accuse others ukuthi benze into. Kodwa ke makuzothi makuvela ufakazi obonisayo ukuthi eqiniso lo muntu uye uyenzile leyo nto, ufumana ukuthi lo fakazi abukho. So ngicabanga ukuthi the lesson that we should draw from this is that abantu kaningi banokukhomplayina ukuthi le nkundla zimosha isikhathi thina siyazi ukuthi lo muntu wenze into ethize. People get convicted in the court of public opinion even before courts pronounce on their guilt or innocence. And this is an important lesson ukuthi even in future let's respect the rule of law 80 umuntu innocent until proven guilty, and today this is evidence of it, because abantu abaningi balahlekelwe isithunzi sabo, balahlekelwe impahla yabo, balahlekelwe into ezininzi ezibangakwazi ukuthi zingabuyisela kibo because of indlela bafumana banecala by a court of public opinion, but only to find ukuthi labantu were innocent. Thank God the death penalty has been abolished in South Africa, because there are many people in the world who have even been sentenced to death for crimes they haven't committed.
Well, the funeral procession now arriving at the Fourways Memorial Park, where Umama Wetu will be buried in that family site alongside two of her great-grandchildren. Members of the public, of course, we know have been forming a guard of honor along the road, hoping to say their final goodbyes to the mother of the nation, Umama Winnie Mandela, who left us last week on the 2nd of April at the age of 81. We now enter a very solemn part of the service where we as the nation, and most importantly and significantly, the family, can say their final goodbyes.
Xa kufikwe kule ndawo akusekho kubuya mva, amathemba aphelile.
Right. We do, of course, still have with the Justice Minister, Michael Masuta, with us. Minister, you were speaking before the break to Sis Nopolo about the process of justice, and I think her question to you was fairly pointed in this particular instance, and if we can be specific to the case of Umama, given the allegations which have now come to light, what recourse is there? What recourse can there be when it comes to clearing her name legally?
I took a stance last year on a controversial matter of whether South Africa should retain in its law books the crime of criminal defamation. And I know there's been very strong views advocating for the abolition of that offense, which is a common law offense. In other words, it comes from our past, from Roman and Roman Dutch law. There was a view that it impedes media freedom and free speech, etc. But I can only imagine the many people who so many wrong and offensive things get said about them unfairly, and them not having recourse, because civil recourse is very costly for most people. And that's why I believe personally, and I'm not articulating a view of government or of the ruling party, because the issue has been raised as a subject of debate, and in fact in the legal fraternity there is such a debate. But I believe that if you take the recent matter of invoking crimen injuria, that is where a number of racist utterances where people were convicted for those. There again, you see people abusing speech to actually violate other people's rights. And I believe that our criminal justice system can come to the avail, especially of those that may not have the resources to defend their rights when they are confronted with abuse of speech that is so damning in violating their rights. So similarly here, I think that it's a pity and unfortunate that nobody really, let alone Umama, took up this matter and actually sought to have her name cleansed against some of the allegations that we made.
We're talking, Minister, about someone who was really the beacon in the fight against injustice in the apartheid years, and it has now come to light, as has been known in some instances for a while, that because of the Dirty Tricks campaign carried out by the apartheid security apparatus, her name was sullied in that mix. There are people who are now admitting to that, who are with us, who are being interviewed and confessing to said allegations. Is the law going to take its course in that regard?
Well, it depends on who initiates. Ordinarily, if you're talking about civil recourse, there has to be a complainant, a plaintiff who brings a case to court. In the case of a criminal case, equally, ordinarily you would need a complainant who must lay a charge. And of course, like I said, as far as I'm aware, the crime of criminal defamation is still part of our law, despite the controversy about it. There has in fact been recent convictions in our courts on that. So it really depends on, you know, somebody taking the initiative. I mean, the Sparrow matter and the Mombek matter took the victim as guards to say, well, there may not have been cases of this nature before. Well, let's chart the waters, the uncharted waters, and let's see how far it takes us and look at the outcome. So the law is always there to be tested. So I can't quite speculate as to what can happen, what should happen. It really depends on you know, whether there's anybody taking the initiative to seek recourse.
All right. So we're coming to you now from Orlando Stadium, which has all but cleared up this afternoon. It had been raining towards the latter part of the funeral of Umama Winnie Mandela. The heavens weeping, bidding her farewell, as it were. I saw as the procession made its way along to Fourways that the rain continued to fall, following her, as it were, says Nokolo, the elements carrying her along to her final resting place in Fourways. So that part of the procession has now reached the Fourways Memorial Park, where Umama will be laid to rest. This is significant, of course, where her great-grandchild is also buried. So it's significant for the family that Umama now will rest next to her.
Ndiqinisekile into kokubana Nikki izawubachukumisa ngandlela thile khona amanxeba azawuvuleka, kodwa ke okwenzekileyo kuyafana nokudaliweyo. Okumnandi nje kukuba uMama Winnie ushiya umzila ongasokuze ulibaleka, izingqi zakhe ziyawuhlala zihleli.
Sithi ke hamba kahle nomzamo lala ngoxolo. And that's it from us here in the Orlando Stadium studio. We hand you now to Fourways, and from the rest of our team here in Orlando, have a good afternoon.
Well, to Fourways indeed we go. We thank Sisnotlolo Hlotbom and Nikiwe Pikicha there at Orlando, who've been providing some sterling coverage of proceedings at Orlando Stadium. But of course, we're now entering the third phase of the day's proceedings. As you can see there on your screen, dignitaries arriving at the Fourways Memorial Park. It's not going to be quite as crowded an affair as we saw the official church service at the stadium. It's going to be really a few dignitaries, a few selected dignitaries. We're seeing there the president and the deputy president arriving, of course accompanied by some senior leaders, but it's not really going to be an occasion that's open to the general public. Obviously, Fourways Memorial Park is a much smaller venue than, say, an Avalon cemetery, so it's not going to be a case that all and sundry can come. For the general public, most of the day's proceedings have now come to an end, but we will of course bring you what visuals we can to give you a sense of what's going on. The president there standing near the podium, which of course he is, as he makes his way rather towards his seating place. This is the last phase of the day. Proceedings began in Soweto from the house, as of course we had coverage from when the hearse left the Orlando home to the stadium, and this is the final phase of what we're going to be covering today. But Prof, as we watch these visuals, I mean, we can't get away from the politics of the day. I think many of the political parties are going to be trying to appropriate the legacy of Winnie Mandela for themselves as we enter an election season in the coming months. And you and I had a discussion about how do we interpret what was said and the actions? The ANC will interpret what Winnie Mandela was trying to do as a unifier in one particular way. Certainly, Julius Malema and the EFF will say it meant something entirely different. He asked the question, which ANC? But one might ask, which Winnie Mandela are we talking about?
It's a very complex thing indeed. The one thing that was happening in the last few weeks and months is that Winnie Mandela made her utterances about her unhappiness, about the corruption in government, about the divided ruling party. And she went on to welcome the new leadership and express that she is hopeful that ANC will do well and so forth. Therefore, ANC is likely to hold on to that, to say this is what she said, and therefore those words could not be misinterpreted. She went further to say she desires that the Julius Malema returns back to the ANC. On the other side, Julius Malema, EFF, may hang on into the current debates. The documentary is shown to say, look at how people are opportunistic to actually appropriate a person they did not defend or endorse at the time when she was living.
Look, it's going to be a very difficult argument to sustain, particularly if you're the African National Congress, because as Julius Malema quite stridently pointed out today, that some of those who were crying the loudest were not there to defend Mama Mandela when it mattered most. And it isn't really without any irony that you had the two program directors today, Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula and, of course, Thandi Modise, both of them on different sides of that divide when people resigned from the ANC Women's League when there was a fight between Adelaide Tambo and Winnie Mandela. We'll talk a little bit more about that, of course, as we continue our coverage.